Hey everyone, so it's mid-2025, the iPhone 16 is out. We're already hearing rumors about the 17, so why are we talking about the iPhone 13? Well, because for a lot of people, this phone right here might just be one of the smartest, most practical tech buys of the year. But the question is, how does it actually feel to use day in and day out, 4 years after it launched? I've been using it as my daily driver, and well, there's a lot to talk about. The good, the bad, and the stuff you really need to know before you decide to buy one or maybe upgrade from one. So in this video, we're going to cover everything. We'll start with a quick look back at what made this phone special when it first came out. Then we'll dive into the design and yes, that 60Hz display. We'll talk about real-world performance with the latest iOS 18, battery life after years of use and whether the cameras still hold up. We'll also tackle the Apple Intelligence and why that might not be the deal breaker you think it is. And finally, I'll give you my honest verdict on who this phone is actually for in 2025. Sound good? Let's get into it. Alright, so to understand why the 13 is still so relevant, you have to remember what a big deal it was back in 2021. It was not a massive redesign from the iPhone 12, but it brought two huge, and I mean huge, quality of life improvements. First, the battery life. This was the year Apple finally seemed to crack the code. The iPhone 13 delivered up to 2.5 more hours of use in a day than the iPhone 12, which was a genuine game changer for a lot of us who were used to carrying a power bank. Second, the A15 Bionic chip wasn't just a small bump, it was incredibly powerful and just as importantly, incredibly efficient, which is a big part of what made that battery life possible. And the camera system got a major upgrade. The main camera sensor was bigger, letting in 47% more light, and it inherited the sensor shift optical image stabilization that was previously exclusive to the top-tier iPhone 12 Pro Max. This made a noticeable difference in photos and videos, especially in low light. It was a subtle but significant refinement that set the stage for why this phone has aged so well. So holding the iPhone 13 in 2025, it still feels premium. You've got these flat aerospace grade aluminum edges, a design language Apple stuck with for a few years, so it doesn't immediately scream old phone like the rounded models that came before it. The front has the ceramic shield glass, which is genuinely tough though, I still recommend a case and screen protector, and it's got that IP68 water and dust resistance, which is always great for peace of mind. The main thing you'll notice compared to say an iPhone 15 or 16 is that these edges are a bit sharper. The newer models have slightly more contoured, rounded edges that feel a little softer in the hand. It's a subtle difference, but it's there. Oh, and the glossy glass back is an absolute fingerprint magnet, which is, well, a classic iPhone feature we could probably do without, but a case solves that easily. Now let's talk about the screen. And this is probably the most controversial part of this phone in 2025. On one hand, it's a fantastic 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. It's bright, rated at 800 nits in typical use. Colors are vibrant and accurate, and watching HDR content on it looks amazing. It is without a doubt a high-quality panel, but it's a 60 Hz refresh rate. And this is where we need to have a real talk. For some people, this is a complete deal breaker. For others, you might not even notice. Here's my take after using it alongside newer phones. This phone was released in the exact same year that Apple gave us ProMotion for the first time in an iPhone on the iPhone 13 Pro. And when you put this base 13 side by side with the 13 Pro, the difference is noticeable. The smoothness of scrolling on the 13 Pro with its 120Hz is just on another level. Coming back to the standard 13, you immediately feel it. Scrolling through feeds or just navigating the OS feels a little less fluid, a little choppier. However, and this is really important, Apple's animations and touch response on iOS are so well optimized that this is probably the smoothest 60Hz experience you can get on any phone. It feels significantly more responsive than 60Hz on a lot of budget Android phones. But honestly, this brings up one of my biggest frustrations with Apple's strategy, and it's a point that is still incredibly relevant today. It's 2025 and Apple is still putting a 60Hz display on the standard iPhone 16. It's a classic Apple move, keeping a premium feature exclusive to the Pro models for years. It feels like a feature that absolutely should have trickled down to the base models by now, especially when you see high refresh rate screens on Android phones that cost a fraction of the price. So when you look at the iPhone 13 screen, you're not just seeing a 4-year-old spec, you're seeing a deliberate choice Apple continues to make on their brand new non-Pro phones. So is it a flaw? Yes. In 2025, it's a significant hardware compromise. Is it a deal breaker? For casual use, texting, and watching videos, it's perfectly fine. But for fast-paced gaming, or if you're just sensitive to refresh rates and frustrated by Apple's product segmentation, this is gonna be the phone's biggest and most annoying weakness. Okay, let's move to what's under the hood, because the A15 Bionic chip is the real hero of this story. Honestly, this chip is the main reason the iPhone 13 is still such a beast in 2025. For everyday stuff, scrolling social media, sending messages, browsing the web, watching videos, it is absolutely flawless. It's fast, it's smooth, and it doesn't stutter. Even for more demanding tasks like editing photos in Lightroom or playing graphically intensive games like Call of Duty, it holds up incredibly well. In fact, performance benchmarks show it's still more powerful than many brand new mid-range Android phones being released this year. Apple really over-engineered this chip with its 6-core CPU and 4-core GPU, and we're all reaping the benefits of that decision years later. But the chip is only half the performance story. The other half is RAM, and the standard iPhone 13 has 4GB at launch. That was fine. In 2025, running the latest version of iOS 18, it's starting to show its limits. This is the phone's other big compromise. What does this mean in the real world? Well, it means you'll see apps reloading in the background more often. If you're scrolling Instagram, then listening to Spotify, switch to Google Maps for navigation, and then open the camera app to take a quick picture, there's a good chance Instagram will have to completely reload when you switch back to it. For a casual user who uses not many apps at a time, you might never even notice this. But if you're a heavy multitasker who likes to jump between a lot of apps, you will feel it. It's not a deal breaker for everyone, but it's a key difference between this and a newer iPhone with 6GB or 8GB of RAM. Now, the battery. As I mentioned earlier, battery life was a huge win for the iPhone 13 at launch. But what about now, after a few years of software updates and battery degradation? Well, it all comes down to one thing: battery health. If you're buying a used or refurbished model, this is the very first thing you need to check in the settings. If the battery health is above, say, 85%, you can still comfortably get through a full day of moderate use. In my testing with a healthy battery, I've been getting around 5 hours of screen on time, which is still really solid and competitive. But if that health number drops into the low 80s or God forbid the 70s, you'll definitely feel it. And you might need a midday top up, especially if you're a heavy user. The good news is, getting a genuine battery replacement from Apple isn't prohibitively expensive, and it can make this phone feel brand new again, giving it a whole new lease on life. So the potential for great all-day battery life is still there. You just have to be a smart shopper or be willing to invest in a new battery. Alright, let's flip it over and talk cameras. You're getting a dual 12-megapixel system, a main wide lens with f1.6 aperture, and an ultra-wide lens. And you know what? For most people, for your Instagram posts, for your family photos, for your TikToks, this camera is still fantastic. In good lighting, photos are sharp, and the colors are great, thanks to Apple's smart HDR4 processing. It's just a really reliable, consistent point-and-shoot camera. The video quality is also a huge strong point. It shoots beautiful, stable 4K video at up to 60 frames per second, and honestly, it looks better than the video from a lot of new phones today. You also get cinematic mode, which was a big new feature at the time for that blurry background effect in videos, though it's capped at 1080p. Now, where does it fall short compared to the latest and greatest? First, there's no telephoto lens, so any zooming you do is purely digital and the quality drops off pretty quickly. Second, compared to newer iPhones with their massive 48 megapixel sensors, you're not going to get the same level of fine detail, especially if you try to crop in on a photo. And in really dark, challenging, low-light situations, newer phones do a better job of pulling out detail and reducing noise. But for 90% of what people use their phone camera for, the iPhone 13 absolutely delivers. Okay, software. This is a huge reason to buy an iPhone, and the 13 is no exception. It's running the latest version of iOS 18 right now, and it handles it well, especially with the new home screen customizations and other tweaks. Based on Apple's incredible track record, this phone should keep getting major iOS updates until at least 2027, maybe even 2028, with security patches for even longer. That is incredible longevity for a smartphone. But there's a big catch. The iPhone 13 does not support Apple Intelligence, Apple's new suite of on-device AI features. And for me, honestly, that's not a deal breaker. Here's why. You know, Apple Intelligence right now is still in its early stages. It's kind of like a public beta. And I usually find myself using more powerful alternatives anyway. The A15 chip in this phone is more than powerful enough to run third-party AI apps like the official ChatGPT app or Google Gemini. And for many tasks like complex research or creative writing, those dedicated apps are frankly more capable right now than Apple's integrated solution. So while you don't get the AI features baked right into the operating system, you still have easy access to top-tier AI. You just have to open an app. Alright, let's bring it all home. Who is this phone actually for? I think it breaks down into 3 groups. First, for those of you on an iPhone 11, an iPhone XR, or anything older, yes, absolutely. This is a massive upgrade for you. You're getting a much better and brighter OLED display, a huge leap in performance and battery life, and a far more capable camera system with things like night mode and an ultra-wide lens. It will feel like a brand new world. Second, if you're using an iPhone 13 right now, honestly, if your battery health is still good, I don't see a compelling reason to upgrade to a standard iPhone 15 or 16. The jump in day-to-day experience just isn't big enough to justify the cost. You'd only really want to upgrade if you're going for a Pro model to get that 120Hz ProMotion display and the dedicated telephoto camera. Otherwise, save your money. And finally, for the value seeker, this is where the iPhone 13 absolutely shines. If you want the best possible iPhone experience without paying flagship prices, this is it. On the used and refurbished market, you can find these in great condition for under $350, sometimes even under $300. And for that price, the level of performance, camera quality, and premium build you get is just an incredible, almost unbeatable deal. It is the undisputed king of value in the Apple ecosystem right now. So there you have it. The iPhone 13 in 2025 isn't the newest or the flashiest, but it's a reliable, powerful, and premium feeling device that has aged incredibly well. It's a true modern classic. But that's just my experience after using it. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you're still rocking an iPhone 13. What's your experience been like? How's your battery holding up? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.